Okay.
Hey guys, and welcome to Tnashi's Movie Corner. Today we will be discussing Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, which came out in 2002. And with me here is my friend Brad, and he will be sharing his input so you get mine as well as his to kind of, hopefully bring out some points from both sides here. 10 years after initially meeting, Anakin Skywalker shares a forbidden romance with Padme, while Obi-Wan investigates an assassination attempt on the Senator and discovers a secret clone army crafted for the Jedi. Now, this movie gets a lot of hate. A lot of people think it's the worst movie, not only of the prequel trilogy, but as a whole. So, Brad, what are your thoughts on this movie? First, do you like it? Do you hate it? Where do you fall on that kind of line?
Really, I think this movie is kind of like just a little bit above average. Obviously, it does have some very obvious problems, which we'll go into later on in the review. But there are still some things that are very much enjoyable for you to watch, and so I think that this doesn't really deserve quite as much flack as it gets. But we'll go into that in our review.
Yes, we will go into that. All right. I agree with you. I don't hate this movie. I went into it, and I've seen it several times, but I went into this last viewing thinking, this movie kind of blows, and one of my biggest issues, I'll say right off the bat, is a lot of the dialogue between Padme and Anakin just doesn't work for me. It doesn't work at all, and it's not really how the dialogue is presented. A lot of people hate on kind of the delivery of the dialogue itself because they're like, who talks like that? And I don't have any fault with that because I see what Lucas was going for. He was going kind of an older dialogue that people used to talk like, and being that this movie is set within its own kind of time space, it's not in the basis of reality here. It's set in this fantasy world that takes place long time ago. I'm okay with that. It just doesn't work for me. So
I think what people need to keep in perspective is that different cultures have a different way of speaking. For instance, if you were to watch about Spartacus, and they're having the way that they talk, nobody obviously would talk like that right now. I mean, it's very structured and a little bit on the poetic side and such like that. So accounting for that and accounting for how vast the galaxy is, you're gonna get a lot of those things that would seem kind of odd to us for our society and our way of doing things, but might actually be perfectly normal in this type of scenario.
right. That being said, it still doesn't work. He gets some points from me for what he's trying to do, but he just doesn't deliver on that. Going again with some of the down points of the movie. One of the other things is a lot of the acting kind of gets crapped upon quite a bit, and you have Hayden Christensen coming in as Anakin, and it's the first movie where you see him as it, and to be honest, he doesn't do that great of a job, but I don't blame him. He's been good in some other movies. I've seen some good work out of him, and he's good in a later movie, I think, in this trilogy. So I don't really think it was as much to do with him as it was perhaps the person directing him. And then you got Natalie Portman, and she doesn't do a very standout job either as Padme. But look at Natalie Portman. Look what awards she's won, with Black Swan and stuff. So I do think that some of the acting, I kind of feel bad a little bit because I think it was probably the direction, the director going in here versus the actors themselves.
I actually think that what part of the problem is that they were being a little too forceful about how this was going to play out. And because of how that was in the screenplay, the actors are kind of mirroring that, and that's why we think that it's a little bit clunky in that regard. And as far as the romance itself goes, I actually think that might have worked better if they had reordered some of these events that take place as the romance goes through, like the event where they're out in the field and Anakin plays that joke on Padme regarding having gotten hurt and stuff like that. I think if that happened before, say, the kiss scene and stuff like that, you would have actually kind of built into it a little bit better. So for this romance and how important it is to Anakin and to his inner feelings, and creating his attachment, I think that they should have actually paced this out a little bit better. But I still think a large part of that problem is that they were trying to be a little too direct and straightforward on this instead of letting things play out a little bit more naturally. What do you think?
I think also, I don't mind the Phantom Menace, but this does feel like it makes it to where the Phantom Menace really isn't relevant. Like, this is kind of where I think we should have started off with Anakin already as a Padawan under Obi-Wan and build that relationship forward. And that's what we get instead, is kind of Anakin thrown in there with Obi-Wan, where, it's like 10 years now that they've been there. And Anakin is he does come off a bit whiny and everything. And I, and of course there's a whole kind of focus on the romance with Padme, but it doesn't have as long of a time to really build. Or I think it would have been a lot better if they had put that in, say, episode 1, really start that, and kind of have it grow through the course of that movie, and then in this movie to where we buy it, and I just don't. I feel like I do feel like episode 1, while I actually do enjoy it, I do feel like it's kind of unnecessary, and trying to tell this story of Anakin's growth and kind of his turn toward the dark side. I just feel like that it's kind of out of place because of that. But I do think Ian McGregor as Obi-Wan is great Obi-Wan, and even people that hate the movie, I feel like they agree that he's a great choice as Obi-Wan for all 3 movies. So I think he works really well. And I want to say, at least for me, I'll get your opinion here in a second. The action scenes, there's several action scenes in this movie that I do really enjoy. I actually enjoy the opening. I have no problems with the opening. I don't really have any problems with the actual assassination attempt, the second one. I know a lot of people do with the whole kind of worms coming in to kill or something, but I don't have any problem with that. I really enjoy the Obi-Wan fight with Jango on Kamino, and then again within the asteroid field and everything. I like the ending battle with Yoda. I thought that was really cool, and I'm sorry he's a Jedi. Of course he'd be able to use a lightsaber. I hate this notion that Yoda's beyond using a lightsaber and he only uses the Force. No, he is very experienced in the Force, and he can do a lot with the Force, but he can also use a lightsaber. The only reason they didn't have him use a lightsaber in the original trilogy was the effects of it weren't up to par. It just didn't work. So they actually had Yoda be carried around by Luke for the majority of the movie, just because they couldn't get him right. They couldn't get him to move right. So, I'm perfectly all right with that. And there's a few minor parts of the Anakin and Dooku fight that don't work for me, but overall, I think the fighting really works. Well, what are your thoughts here?
Honestly, I really like this action too, for the most part. It was very, it was very quick paced. It was very kind of intense. And out of Jango Fett, you actually get a little bit more of what people were kind of hyping Boba Fett up to be.
That's true.
He actually fights. He manages to survive an attack by a Jedi. At one point he even kills a Jedi. It just kind of goes to show that he knew what he was doing. And the space battle that happened when, you know, Obi-Wan's pursuing him and all that, that looked great. Sounded great when those sonic booms are going off.
It did sound really good.
And I really like what they did here with Obi-Wan and with Yoda. You know, you get a little bit more of what they were like in the past, you know, when Obi-Wan was obviously in his prime, you know, and he's going out and he's investigating all these things, and you're getting all these little pieces that are like, it's like, you know, something really big is afoot, you know.
Mystery with Sifo Dyas, which does get explained in the Clone Wars show. I just want to put it out there, like, they did kind of leave you hanging a little bit on it, but it does get explained within the canon for the Star Wars Clone Wars show. So I do like that. I also there's a couple scenes, like I really like the scene where Anakin is bringing his mother back home, and he's walking there and he's holding her body and her body's covered, and then the look on his face, you know, the kind of the anger and sadness that you see on his face. I really like that. I also like the scene where Boba Fett as a kid is lifting the helmet of Jango, of his dad, and you just see the image of the boy holding the helmet. And there was a joke about that in a review of someone I watch a lot, Chris Stuckman. He was talking about wouldn't Jango's head fall out? But there's a scene when Jango's head gets cut off. There's a little shadow of his head actually falling away from the helmet as the helmet goes on. So, and you know, as much as I dislike some of the dialogue, I won't say all of it, but majority, let's say 95% of the dialogue between Anakin and Padme I don't like. That's not the majority of the movie. Like, I thought that was the majority of the movie. It felt like that was the majority of the movie, but it really isn't. There's a lot of other action pieces, and there's a lot of kind of mystery and the whole deal with the clones and on Camino and everything. That was, you know, that was done really well. So I really like that. And I do like Count Dooku. You know, he was just kind of shown, but I didn't need the presence that you kind of got when you first see Darth Vader. I didn't need that for this guy. I know a lot of people do, but that just it wasn't necessary for me. So, and yes, sometimes you know, you can tell that they're CG, and people talk a lot about how practical is good, and I agree that practical can be good depending on how you use it, just like CG can be good depending on how you use it. And there's a lot of CG in this. Some of the CG works better than others, but I do think overall it's not bad. Like, I don't know why it gets so much hate, you know, I guess for the sake of hating it.
Most of the CG I find is awesome. I think too is just, you know, it is fine, it works pretty well. There are probably a few small moments where you can really tell, like one of the like a little part of the arena fight with Anakin and his lightsaber, you could tell because you could actually like see the face of CGI Anakin, and I did notice little things like that. But overall, though, I think a lot of these effects, you know, worked pretty well. You know, it was just minor little tidbits here and there that kind of didn't work for me. I agree. Count Dooku is much more subtle as a Sith, and you know, a Sith doesn't kind of have to always be in your face about stuff or always act like, you know, he's the bad guy, like he's got bad guy written all over his forehead, you know.
Right.
This guy is actually kind of manipulating people into believing that what he's offering them is a legitimate course of action, you know, that is succeeding from the Republic, you know, creating this confederacy and all that kind of stuff. You know, even the Jedi seem to have underestimated him because of this, because they're like, he's just a politician, you know, he's not a criminal, he's not a murderer or any of those things.
I think the thing is too, like, you find out obviously that he used to be a Jedi. Not only a Jedi, he used to be Yoda's, you know, apprentice. And to be honest, I buy that. Like, given his presence, given how he acts and everything, I buy that he used to be a Jedi and that he's turned. But he still has some of those kind of Jedi traits in a way, you know. So
he's a lot more collected than what many of, like, the other Sith have been up to this point. Whereas other Sith tend to show a little bit more like, their anger and their arrogance, their drive to like really take you down. Count Dooku just does. He remains calm and he just does what he needs to.
Yeah, I think it worked out. So, I gotta ask you, from a 1 to 10 grading scale, what do you give this movie and why?
I think I would give this about a 6.5 to a 7.
Okay.
For me, that does represent above average, and I think that although this has some very blatant problems, there are still many things that like I said earlier, I enjoy watching about this. I enjoy watching all the stuff involving Obi-Wan, and as a concept, I'm not opposed to the romance between Padme and Anakin. I think that their delivery on this really suffered, but as a concept, I think it still works, and this kind of sets up for this great global galaxy-wide conflict that we get in the Clone Wars. So, in that regard, I still find value in this movie, and I think it's above average.
I find value in this movie too, and I do like it. For me, giving it a rating, I'd have to say I'm gonna give it a 6. I don't feel like I can go any higher than the 6. There are quite a few good moments in there, and it certainly brought up my rating from what I initially thought. But there's still some bad too, and it's so noticeably bad that it does kind of take you out of the movie a bit. But as a starting point for what we see with the Clone Wars show, I do like that. I do like, and I'm fine with the title being Attack of the Clones. It is a teaser to what is going to the Clone Wars itself. Like, oh my god, sorry, it's like getting the hate for just the title. It doesn't make any sense to me. But anyway, I'll give it a 6. I think that's pretty fair. And again, that's obviously above the average, and it's above what I gave episode 1. So I think there's definitely some good moments in there. I wish some of them had been a little longer. I wish some of them had concluded a little bit, so we didn't have to wait for the Clone Wars. But that's here or there. But anyway, guys, so there you go. That is our thoughts on the movie. But what do you guys think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? I know there's a lot of people that hate this movie, and there's some people that like it too. Personally, I don't mind it, and I guess you don't mind it either, huh?
No, I do not. In fact, I think sometimes in talking about these things, each party can kind of come to realize things that they might not have noticed the first time around. So, discussions about these movies are always a good thing, as long as they're kept, of course, respectful of other people's opinions.
Right, and I am interested to hear what you guys have to say about this movie. Please comment, let me know what you think about this, and go ahead and tell me. I'm really curious. What's the order for your Star Wars movies like? From the one you like the most to the one you like the least. I'm curious to see what the order is. And I said this in the Phantom Menace review. I will try to be doing these once a month leading up to The Force Awakens. So stay tuned for the other ones. Anyway, thanks guys, and peace.